the state of alignment, just by human nature, you're kind of like, it's like a roller coaster, I guess. You're flying all over the place. You're in and out. You're trying your best. And like trying to stay aligned in itself as a human is really challenging, right? Because life just comes at you hard. But what I do to stay in line is as simple as a task list. So that's like a daily ritual. I love just having a task list. I don't put a time on it. Some days it's 10 hours, some days it's 4. That's just what works for me.
Welcome to Her Drive Podcast, a female-focused interview series with women of the world discussing their road trips to success. I'm your host, Cindy Kremblatt, a travel expert, business owner, and curious spirit with a knack for meeting fascinating women. Please join me as I hop in the passenger seat and chat with these ambitious women about what drives them, twists and turns, and those pedal to the metal moments. Let's drive. Hello and happy spring, Her Drive listeners. Today's guest is someone I've been following for quite a bit on social. She is creating some beautiful works of art, and I'm really excited to have Lindsay Janisse of House of Floravana on as a guest today. How are you, Lindsay?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
I am fantastic and super thrilled that we get to learn a bit more about you and your beautiful work.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate that.
Can you kind of dive into what House of Floravana is?
Yeah, sure. So I use a mix of mediums to create one-of-a-kind, never duplicated functional artwork. Currently, my goals are to kind of go big or go home. That's kind of where I'm at right now. But essentially what it is floral preservation. If you're asking me, that's what I'm going to do every time. Although I do other styles, that's kind of the central focus. And then it's usually fitted into some sort of a live edge piece of wood and then sealed to the top with resin. And from there, you have your piece for me. So I do everything from dining room tables to coffee tables to headboards, to front doors, to wall art, to charcuterie boards, to remembrance pieces. So basically anything you can dream up, I can do. And my focus nowadays is not using molds as much, and trying to go off the live edge piece that my client and I would pick out together to really bring it to that next level. So that's essentially what I do. It's a lot more complicated than that when we go step by step, but it's woodworking and resin artistry and floral preservation mainly.
Thank you. So, that's a perfect synopsis for us folks who don't understand exactly what all is entailed as far as what you're creating. If people don't know what live edge is, can you describe what that may be?
It's basically a piece of wood that's cut down from a sad old tree most times. And then it's planed down at the mill, brought to me at, 120 grit or 100 grit, nice and level, nice and clean, and at the proper temperature. And it has, if you're looking at a piece of wood, the live edge is just basically the windy, bendy areas of the wood. So that in itself to me is art. And so if you're looking at my style of work, it's the weirder, the better. The more nooks, knots, and rotted areas that come from the tree naturally are like prized possessions to me, because that's just more like my canvas, right? How I get to incorporate, the florals inside. So it's just, live edge piece of wood is just the windy, bendy areas of the wood. So it's not like a straight slab.
Right.
I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And from what I've noticed, you build out what seems to be a frame to allow for the resin to not just like ooze and to hold a shape. So how do you build those frames?
So those are molds, and those come from, I use Exotherm Design. Carlos, his name has been with me since the very beginning. He'll be with me until the very end. He has been absolutely fantastic to me, and has believed in this dream of mine since day one. So the molds, essentially, it's a no stick, no seal form. So the resin doesn't actually bond to that mold. So it's perfect for using resin inside, because then you can create your own shape inside, or you can actually take the piece of wood and the floral and the resin to the size of the mold. So from beginner level to expert level, I definitely recommend using molds. Now, where you see me doing, and much more lately, those live edge pieces, the mold's just kind of a container for like the center areas or the areas underneath of like a rotted or nooked out area, just so it won't stick. But I actually dam them out myself now. So on the windy, bendy areas of the wood, you'll see that I use like a tuck tape. And that's just because I'm kind of trying to get to that next level. But if you're wanting to do like a standard piece, you would use the molds. But even with the molds now, I have a massive mold. And I think at one point this month, I was doing like 8 pieces at one time. So they're just so versatile, and you can use them for so many different things.
Oh, that's so interesting. And what I've gathered from limited exposure to resin is it takes, to do it the proper way, it takes a lot of time. Is that right?
And practice, and a lot of swearing.
Okay.
And a lot of patience. And you have to be using the right brand. And you just have to get your hands dirty, because before I had the intention of selling my work, I must have put in, hundreds of hours. Like, it really is an art. And if you're doing a basic pour, that's one thing. But the minute you start putting material in that, anything and everything that can go wrong will. So you just expect it. And, prepare to do some deep breathing, because there'll be some troubleshooting along the way. But it takes time, effort, and patience. And practice. It's just like anything, right? Once you practice at something, you just get good at it. So
sure.
It really is an art, though. Yeah. And I've used like dozens of brands of resin. To me, the resin is more just the moving part of it all, right? It's the connecting part of what I would consider the feature to my work, which is like the floral and ingredients and the live edge and the woodworking. So, in the future, I'll be focusing more on, the actual piece of wood and the ingredients, and less on maybe so much resin, because I've got a few kind of cool projects coming up too. That's going to, the focus will be just as much as the exotic piece of wood as it will be with the resin.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you don't do just floral pieces. I've seen you add crystals and other mementos into the resin, which is beautiful. And I'm just curious, how do you get the various pieces that you're placing to float within a certain space? Do you have to pour like one layer at a time, and just to ensure that it's placed correctly?
Yeah. So each project that I do has a different method. And I wish it was as easy as just kind of like a, one stop, like one method, but I really take on a different angle for each project. I do have a Patreon site for people who want to learn from me. And we go really in depth with that. And I get in front of the camera. Right now, actually, we're doing a project together, start to finish. Step by step. And as I move along and the projects change, you'll see how I change the angle of how I'm going to pour, how deep I'm going to pour, how many layers I'm going to do. Again, if you don't know flowers and you don't know crystals and you don't know glass and you haven't worked with floral preservation, you wouldn't know, because even the smallest amount of moisture in any material can disrupt the cure time or the way your resin cures, even on the second, third, and fourth layer. So it's so complex, these types of pores, that it's hard to explain it all within like a short time. Like even start to finish, the one I'm working on now, I think we're on like step 8 and we're not even halfway through. And it's probably like an hour and a half worth of explaining, getting in front of the camera, using power tools, resin, sanding, cutting, like it's a whole lot of work before we even get to pouring. So it really just depends on the project, right? And there's always exceptions to each rule that I have personally. So I might tell you that this project needs 2 or 3 pours, but then you'll see me on the next project doing 7 or 8. So it really just does depend. So I'm a little bit cautious to like give out advice, because I don't want people coming back to me and saying, well, I did this. And because, I need the proper chance to explain, okay, this project might need this, but this project might need that. Right. So that's also one of the reasons why I don't just throw out advice online, because I don't want people to be like, well, you told me to do this and now the whole thing's destroyed and it blew up because I poured too deep, and like anything can happen. Right. There's so many things go into it as well, like the temperature, the moisture level in the air, what's inside. If there's flowers inside, there's going to be bubbles inside. If you pour too deep, the whole thing will explode.
Whoa, no way, really?
So it overheats. You're going to destroy a mold. I don't need to have any of this on my shoulders. So the Patreon allows me to explain things slowly and troubleshoot something one at a time with each person.
Oh my gosh. I have such respect for you.
It's like a lot. Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah. So it's been a pretty beautiful journey so far. It's wild, actually, how things happen.
So how did you get into this? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to just say that I have no idea. No, I'm just kidding. So long story short, or shorter, I've been watching my mom and my gram and my auntie's garden and find that love of gardening and putting your hands in the dirt and feeling the earth and growing something from seed since I was a little girl. So the gardening and the floristry I've done both as a job and as a passion. Especially once I got my first house, it was like hands-on, full bore, like the most magical garden ever. That last garden took me 4 years to build, but that's always been a part of my life, always. So that has, in anyone who knows me, there's always crafting going on with live flowers or dried flowers, or wreath making, or, little arts and crafts as a way to cope with like lifing, right? But then with my dad and my husband, carpentry and woodworking has come very naturally to them. And over the years, I've picked up on like simple projects and simple tasks, and like building gardening beds, and, making like a tabletop, like very standard, like, entry level work on my end, just by watching them. But what happened is after the first, second, third, I can't even remember how many lockdowns, like most of us, I was losing my mind, like, because no one could go anywhere. So I started dabbling in resin just for fun, because I had all of these dried flowers that I would save over the years. Every time spring and summer would come, I would save my favorites. And I just started making like little jewelry and like little trays and little ashtrays and things like that. And then I was like, wait a minute. Nobody does this. This mix of mediums. I like across the world at that time, I'm talking like once the light switch went off, I knew I had something special. Because if you're a woodworker, you're normally not going to be like expert level gardening and floristry. You're not, so I knew I had like a niche, like a very interesting niche market, right? But I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I knew I was going to do it. So from that point on, I really went full tilt because I had all the time on my hands from the lockdowns, right? So I'm like, well, I might as well make this a go, because previous to that, I had gone back to school as an adult for social work and women and gender studies. And after what felt like 2 decades, I finally graduated. And so I was on the hunt for a career style job from my schooling, and really was just having a hard time finding something that wasn't, dealing with trauma every single day, day in and day out. And then as that was happening and I couldn't find work, I was working in floristry, just to keep busy and, be an active participating member of society. And then the lockdowns happened. So I was finding myself kind of like floating somewhere in between. So never in a million years did I think this is what I would be doing. But the minute I realized I could incorporate woodworking, exotic woods, florals, crystals, all the things together, that it was going to work. Like I knew it, right? Because who doesn't like flowers and exotic woods together? Mm-hmm. Even if you think, oh, Lindsay's art, I don't like it. But I've never met anyone who doesn't like flowers or wood. So I'm like, okay. So from there, I started selling like little pieces on Etsy. And then my mom, of course, right? My ride or die. She's like always in my corner. I somehow convinced her to let me do a dining room table for her. And I quoted it out, like the price, just for the materials alone. And her and my stepdad finally agreed to let me do it, because I knew all I needed to do was get it out in the world, mm-hmm. right? Because we're talking thousands of dollars in just material alone. So I hadn't entered that space yet. I have a lot of background too in sales, but not with art. So they agreed to it. It came together. It was kick-ass. And, but of course, as I went on with that project, the materials I had to keep asking for more money. And my mom and my stepdad were like, oh my, like it just didn't stop, right? Like all of a sudden I needed an air compressor that was like $3,000 and all of these tools too that I didn't have at first. So this project turned into like totally something different, but I'm forever grateful for them, because the minute I finished that table, I had people requesting to come and see the table at their house. Mm. And I think within like 3 weeks after that, I got my first massive custom order. It was an 8-foot dining room table that actually ended up being someone who worked with my dad for 30 years. So it was just like a full circle moment. Mm. And then it was just a matter of time, right? Then there's the social media aspect. So at that point I knew, I was like, this is it for sure. Like it's happening. The possibilities are endless. Now people are seeing these big pieces from me out there, so they know I'm capable of it. And it's just a matter of when the calls are going to come in and who's going to decide to book. And then I had a viral video on TikTok, and then that literally booked me out for the entire year. And then I had another viral this year on Instagram, and that booked me out for this year. And so really, it's from all of my, supporters online who, help by liking, sharing, following, and just kind of hanging out with me. And I just get to create these one-of-a-kind pieces from start to finish exactly how my clients want them to be. Mm. Minus like the layout, right? That's kind of, they're paying for my expertise in terms of the floristry part, but we like pick the wood together and the colors together and the size together. And it's just turned out to be like the most beautiful journey ever. Mm-hmm. And that stemmed from basically like loneliness and despair and some pretty dark times. Again, I know a lot of us felt that in the pandemic and the lockdowns, but it was a way of coping with feeling out of control, right? We had no control over anything that was going on. And so just diving into that creative outlet really kind of brought me through that time. And, art helps. Art helps in anything in life. Mm-hmm. It's just like, make art, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. That's definitely my recommendation to people. So yeah, now here we are.
Yeah. What a beautiful story. Yeah. And how quickly things can align and snowball if you're following your curiosity and allowing the bliss to kind of come from within. I think when we follow other people's voices rather than what we're hearing from our own soul, we tend to slow a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you start feeling a sense of ungroundedness. And so, in your heart, when something brings you joy, you can't explain it. Mostly, it's probably coming from your memory or, fun times in your life, or when you felt the most joy in previous experiences, but when something lights a fire in you. Mm-hmm. So the only thing I would recommend is just to follow that fire. It's just to follow it. And you don't really even need to know the whys. Mm-hmm. It's just, it will just keep opening these doors for you. Mm-hmm. Because I know, I think I had started with 1,000 followers, and that was I was, on online every day, putting my full effort into getting, the exposure out there. But just putting all of it into this journey, because I just knew that this is where the fire was going to burn bright for me. Right? Because there's just so many ideas, so many different ways you can bring someone's idea to life. And that's what's so beautiful about what I do, is that I get to make something specific to a client's idea, right? I'm not putting things out there and then hoping they sell afterwards. But that didn't come without a lot of hard work, right? There's a lot of small pieces that I had online first for years, a year and a half at least, before it really started to take off after I had finished that dining room table. And I was at that every day, all day long too. So definitely, you got to be in it for the long run.
That's so interesting.
To make it happen.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear you say that. I feel it seems as though many of us live in this instant gratification world and forget that most of the time it takes not only sweat equity but time equity and leading to your first bump of success.
It's like anyone around me will tell you, well, I see her outside every day sanding. I have been grinding at this for years and putting everything into it. And understanding that it's not going to happen overnight. And to be honest with you, if the lockdowns hadn't happened, I would have never have continued to do this, right? Yeah. So you do need the time. And I just kind of took advantage of that time that I had, but I also didn't appreciate it because I'm aware that if I didn't have that time, it would be really hard for me to start putting all I had into this if I was working a full-time job somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So the stars kind of just aligned. Mm. So I'm grateful for that for sure, because, that's it. I don't know how it all happened really. It was one thing after another. And then now we're here. But there's something to say about working hard for that dream, and the beauty really is in the struggle and just, failing forward and making mistakes and having people around you that are on your team rooting for you. And, the support too is helpful for sure.
It sounds like you just have such a beautiful perception of your reality. And I'm curious, does that
sometimes
does that come from
struggle?
It's from struggle. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I sometimes have a good perception. I'm just human like all of us, and I just try my best. As Stutz would say, I don't know, have you seen that documentary with Jonah Hill?
Yes.
Okay, the part where he talks about putting the pearl on the string? Mm-hmm. Nothing has stuck with me more than that couple of sentences. Mm-hmm. So I just try to do my best every day, and that's it. I just keep putting those pearls on the string and hope for the best,
That's so beautiful.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said, that's so beautiful.
Yeah. That definitely, that was like a key, like, love him. Wish he was my therapist. Like, I'd pay for him. Because I think as adults, we all need therapists. That's the other reason why, like, I try hard to be a good human and are pretty good humans, as I say, because no one, we're all just doing our best. But I think everybody should, it should be mandatory to have a therapist, in my opinion.
I think we all need a professional of some sort to speak to. My friends are wonderful and they're very informed, but a non-biased, third party. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm grateful. I'm aware. I'm here for the ride. I hope it continues. I think that. I'm so grateful to those who are able to commission me to do pieces for them, and the people who are just online, just rooting for me hard and watching my videos and just hanging out with me. So it seems like I have a really great group of friends on my own little corner of the internet too. So that really helps as well.
Absolutely. I always say that social media is 100% a blessing or a curse depending upon how you utilize it. And the same goes for everyday life. But I think that, to utilize it in such a powerful way, to connect with people, to sell like these beautiful tables and creations that you're making, it helps make the world a more loving and beautiful space. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. And honestly, like art is like, life is art. Art is life. So you might have some people say, well, this isn't, a real job. And to them, they're right. Like, everyone's right from their own perspective, right? Everyone's allowed their own opinions. But for me, the intention with what I'm doing is to make like heirloom items and, to bring emotion into that process. And that's truly from my heart. Like, even when I'm working on my mom's baby ring is inside, I'm doing a piece for myself finally after a lot of years, thanks to my two favorites, my crystal company, KW Rockspace and Chill Epoxy. They're sponsoring that project for me, which is just so fantastic. And I'm so grateful, because I'm going to do one for myself finally. But just putting my mom's ring, her baby ring, my grandmother's engagement ring. So for me, it's like an heirloom piece. So every day I get to look at that and think of my mom and my gram.
Beautiful.
Or I just had finished one, and she had a letter from like 1945 that we put in there from her great grandmother and grandfather. So these pieces that I make the intention is so deep, and it's just such an honor to be able to bring that into like their homes, their space, their safe place, to have something to look at that's colorful and meaningful. And so to me, it's more than just furniture, right? It's a part of your story. It's, you want to pass it down to future generations. And, it's just wonderful. I'm really, truly so grateful that people like believe in me to do this sort of stuff.
Oh,
it's wild. And they're just like from across the country. And the next thing you know, someone's getting on a flight to come pick up their piece for me and bringing it back to California. And I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? The guys at the border are like, you're going to pick up a piece of furniture? Why can't you pick it up here? And they're like, no, you don't get it. So I have a client that's coming on Saturday from New York. So just like their willingness to travel to come and pick them up for the bigger ones, because I get so nervous to ship them. It's like, what is happening?
Absolutely.
So it's just so cool.
I love it. So looking towards like down the road, what do you anticipate seeing for yourself and for your brand?
Well, for me, I just can't, I'm already I'm feeling so aligned now. So everything else is just bonus, right? At this point, allows me a safe place to sleep and food on my table and some extracurricular activities. And, you know, so I'm feeling grateful there. My idea of success is pretty much happening right now. I have loved ones, family and friends in my life. You know, it's a nice life. But in terms of goals for the business, the beautiful part is I don't know what's coming down the pipes. I have no idea. But we're going to go as big as we can. We're going to do the most outrageous things that I can. I'm just going to keep pushing those limits, those skill sets. And now that I have a large portfolio, I think people will be more trusting to, you know, do like a 12-foot front door or, you know, a greenhouse or, so the wilder, the better. And I also envision, you know, a little farmhouse with a porch, maybe a wood burning fireplace and a big pole barn off the side with some chickens running around. So I envision like a really big space, to do what I do with more room for sure. That's a new goal. And then maybe teaching some classes and then maybe bringing in some of like my schooling, to bring in, you know, people to use art as a form of therapy. So that's an idea that I'm excited about in the future, to do, you know, some really cool classes once a month, for people who feel like they need to, like, you know, use some of their energy up through art. So there's that. Yeah. And I have some personal goals too. I want a big garden again. Big flower farm for sure. That's definitely coming. Yeah.
I love that. It's also beautiful. And are there any like rituals or practices that you do to help you continue in your state of alignment?
I think the state of alignment, just by human nature, you're kind of like, it's like a roller coaster, I guess. You're flying all over the place. You're in and out. You're trying your best. And like trying to stay aligned in itself as a human is really challenging, right? Because life just comes at you hard. But what I do to stay in line is as simple as a task list. So that's like a daily ritual. I love just having a task list. I don't put a time on it. Some days it's 10 hours, some days it's 4. That's just what works for me. But I find feeling aligned, calm, grounded comes from having that sort of routine every single day. Hanging out with loved ones at night. A simple thing as like enjoying a thunderstorm, that brings me back to alignment. Cuddling by the fire, that brings me back to alignment. And when I feel really overwhelmed, I just remember that those pearls on the string, that's like my new favorite kind of coping mechanism when I'm feeling overwhelmed. When I have a lot on my plate, which these days seems often, talking to my therapist, talking to my mom as well, who's also kind of like a therapist, and just giggling as much as possible with my friends.
Beautiful.
Like the immature type giggles, like prank calling,
yes.
Like doing pranks on each other, like bringing it back to like that childhood joy.
Yes, ma'am.
Because then it's like, okay, nothing is as big of a deal as we think it is, right? Lifing is lifing, whether we like it or not. So to stay aligned and to deal with lifing that sucks, we're going to just pull some, joy back into things. And a task list. That's basically all I know for sure that works for me.
Magical. And if you could go back in time and give a younger you some words of wisdom, what age would you be and what would you say?
No one knows what they're doing. Most adults, none of us know what we're doing, is what I've realized as an adult from a former child. I have no kids. So, don't take things too seriously. Everyone's giving you advice from their own perspective, which may not align with where you're going in your life. Take it easy. Okay. You don't need to know what you're doing at 14. I would put my most confusing time in my life from about 14 to 18. Have as much fun as possible. And, people's opinions, it's so hard, right? Because at that age, that very sensitive, vulnerable age, there's so many changes happening with teenagers. And it's hard to see from an outside perspective when you zoom out that things aren't as important as they seem. But, trying to find like really good friendships, I have a few friends that I've had forever and ever and ever. But just not listening to people who think they know, but they don't know. But in hindsight, it's hard, right? Because you don't know. As a kid, you think you're just kind of following the crowd and just kind of going with your heart of what feels good, regardless of what, your peers may think or say or what's cool or what's trending. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And don't always listen to adults and stand up for yourself. Absolutely. Because, as kids, they're so often tossed around as like these little puppets that all these adults, are just, they're looking for their own fulfillment through their kid, but it's hard to recognize as a kid, right? To like stay in your lane and be respectful, but also speak up, right? If you have an issue with someone or you have an opinion about something and you're strong-willed and, say it, be it, give your opinion. Like your opinions matter even though you're like a little human. Like you're just as, important as the rest of us. So that would be it. I'm not a mom, but my best friends are moms, and it's just been the most magical experience to watch my girlfriends raise kids. And so I see things from a different angle now, which is the most incredible thing to watch because I'm not a mom and I get to look at it from this like fairy god auntie or something where I can see clear too, right? Because I'm not worried and trying to keep my own little humans alive. So it's like this really special nook that I get to sit and hang out and watch these beautiful little beings thrive and grow. So I try and give, advice to them too, as a former child only, right? Well, I'm not giving any mom advice. I'm not but just, doing things like, helping them growing into strong, independent people.
It's so beautiful and 100% relatable. Well, I thank you, Lindsay, for sharing your story and being a guest. And we'll be sure to link to your website in the show notes. And again, just thank you so much for your time.
No worries. And thank you so much for having me. And I wish you so much success with this podcast too. It's beautiful.
Thanks for listening to Her Drive with Cindy Cramblett. If you want to know more about today's guest or know a fascinating woman you'd love for me to interview, please see the show notes, visit Instagram or her-drive.com. And please, 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 if you love the show, leave a review on iTunes. Thanks for riding along and subscribe to join our next woman and her drive to success.